Jesse Lee Peterson is the most courageous, outspoken critic of the civil rights establishment in America today. Raised without his father on a plantation near Tuskegee, Alabama, during the Jim Crow era, Peterson has lived a part of America's history few have experienced. After a spiritual transformation, Peter founded Bond, a nationally recognized nonprofit organization dedicated to rebuilding the family by rebuilding the man. Peterson is also the founder of the Bond Leadership Academy, a private school in Los Angeles. He's a radio talk show host, speaker, family counselor, and author of The Antidote, Healing America from the Poison of Hate, Blame, and Victimhood. He's also a media commentator on Fox, CNN, and other national TV and radio networks. Jesse, thank you for being here with me.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You start off chapter 3 by saying, "Over the years, because of the positions I take, many a critic has questioned whether I am an authentic black man. If they really want to know the answer to that question, I would invite them to come back with me to the plantation where I grew up outside of Eufaula, Alabama." So could you tell us a little bit about your background and where you come from?
Yes. Well, I grew up in Alabama, and as you just read, on a plantation down in Alabama. And it was right outside. The plantation sits between Eufaula, Tuskegee, and Montgomery, Alabama. Those are the major cities, surrounding cities. And my parents, and their parents, and their parents, and their parents were raised on this plantation. I grew up under the Jim Crow era, where black Americans were not allowed to live in certain places or go to certain areas. I went to a movie theater once when I was a teenager, and we had to sit in the balcony because black Americans were not allowed to sit with white people downstairs. But being a teenager, that was fine because we had a better view. I didn't mind at all. I had to pick cotton. The boys were taken out of school to plant the crop, and then a second time to bring it in. So I missed a lot of school time and things like that. My great-grandfather was killed in his bed one night because he ran the plantation at one time, and there was a black man who was fired from another plantation. He came over and asked my great-grandfather for a job. He gave it to him, but the white man that owned that plantation said, "No, you can't hire him." My grandfather was a very strong man, so he said, "No, I'm keeping him." They came to kill him one night, and he had his gun under the bed. When he went for it, when they tried to kill him, he went for his gun and he ran them off. They came back another time, and he went for his gun, but his wife had removed it from the bed, under the bed, so they were able to kill him. And I bring that up because during those times, growing up on the plantation, we were never taught to hate anyone. There was no such thing as racism. We were told that there's good and bad in black people, there's good and bad in white folks, and that we should treat people the way that we would like to be treated. And so blacks didn't have the same hatred for white Americans that they have today.
Interesting. When you talk about the civil rights movement, you seem to be a big critic of it.
Yes.
But I think you tend to make a difference between the actual movement and post-civil rights movement.
Right.
And in chapter 10, you say, "The civil rights movement is dead. As blue-collar philosopher Eric Hoffer once said, every great cause begins as a movement, becomes a business, and eventually degenerates into a racket. The civil rights movement has been a racket for many, many years." Can you indulge on that a little bit?
The original intent of the civil rights movement under Martin Luther King Jr. was to just make sure that the laws that protected and governed white Americans would be the same laws that governed and protected black people, and that we should be able to move freely about, live anywhere that we want to, and not have to be concerned about being killed for it or whatever was going on. So they started out with a good intent, but it went out of control when they started trying to force white Americans to let us live with them, force integration, because you can't force anyone to love you. You have to do it voluntarily, right? And there were white people who were working alongside with black Americans. They were not in support of this separation that was happening by force. So they fought with black Americans to change that. When Martin Luther King was assassinated, Jesse Jackson and others took over the movement, and that's when it really went south. in that Martin Luther King said that we should love our enemy, overcome evil with good. Jesse Jackson and others took the movement and said that white people are to blame for your condition, and that black people turned their lives over to the so-called civil rights movement, Jesse Jackson and others, and as a result, they became race hustlers. And so they started to use black Americans in order to gain power and wealth by creating a word called racism. So they said to white people, "You are racist." And black people said, "Yes, that's right." So they caused blacks to be angry at whites, and they put fear in white people because the last thing white people want to be called is a racist.
All white people to move to the back. This is a black and brown resistance movement.
And so as long as white people have this fear, then Jackson and others can gain power and wealth. And that's why I said we have to get rid of that word racism, because it's a lie that's been made up. It's not about color at all.
And you talk about racism in the book briefly. He says, anyone can be racist. Racism is an irrational anger that inhabits your heart and controls you. And the reason why that's interesting to me is because a lot of people say that black people can't be racist.
Right.
And the way you word it, it's from within. So
right.
Anyone can be racist.
Anyone can be that. That's why when I wrote the book, it's not a political book, it's for all people. Because anyone who is not raised by good parents can be hateful toward their fellow man. The problem is black Americans are angry because their fathers and mothers have failed them. 72 to 73% of black children are born out of wedlock today. And they are angry at their mothers and grandmothers because their mothers and grandmothers have passed their anger down to the children by being impatient with them, in some cases telling them that their fathers didn't care about them, imposing their will on their children. And when you impose your will on the children, you cause them to become angry. And so, and then blacks are also yearning for their fathers. There's an emptiness there, a void in their lives because they have not received the love of their fathers. And instead of telling them that you need to forgive your parents for what they've done to you, the hustlers say that it's the white man, that the white man is racist against you. And in that state of anger, it's hard to believe the truth and easy to believe a lie. And so blacks are angry and they believe this lie that the white man is against them based on color, when it's really the anger that they feel toward their failing parents.
And
white people could be that way too. If the worst thing that can happen to a child, whether male or female, is to be turned away from your father. When you're turned away from the fathers, you're turned away from your own identity, because there's a spiritual order to life, and that order is God in Christ, Christ in man, man over woman, woman over children. So the love comes from God to Christ, to the father, to the mother, to the children. But when you take that father out, you take Christ out, Satan is able, the deceiver is able to come in and bring in hate and not love. And that's what we see happening within the black family and white families and Hispanic families, where the fathers are not there in the right way.
And you talk about anger and love, or is it hate and love? And you say that there's only one or the other. So if you're not hating, you're loving, or
That's
vice
right.
versa, right?
Yeah. Love is simply mean don't hate. When you don't have anger in your heart, you have love. Love is not this emotional crap that we feel for one another, and we only get along when you agree with me. The moment you disagree, now I'm mad at you. That's not love. Love, real love, is not based on anything physically. Nothing that I can get from you. I love you because I love what's right. And so it's not, I don't need your love, I need to love you. And you need to love, and so on and so on. And this false love that men and women are feeling is coming from anger, because anger awakens your emotions. If you notice, when people have sex in relationships, you know, they have a fight with their girlfriend or their wife, and then they'll have sex, and they'll say, oh, it was the best sex, right? Because it was sex based on emotions. Now they feel better, but down the road they're going to have another argument, and they need to have sex or drink or do drugs or something to feel better. But real love is not based on that at all.
Interesting. And also, you talk about you talk about race baiters, elitist media, and self-serving politicians, and you give them a name. You call them the alchemists.
Yes.
All right.
Yes, I'm all right.
Are you racist?
Am I what?
What are you think of these people now? Why? Why you stay
She
here?
said, are you racist?
Am I racist?
Yeah.
No, I'm not a racist. Why do you ask that?
Well,
Why is it that people who stand up for America and who want to protect our own borders, why are we always trying to be backed up with the racist thing? I'm standing here with a black man. If I was a racist, this is my brother right here. If I'm standing with him, how can I be a racist?
Are you a racist?
No.
So why would you ask him, is he a racist?
Well, let me see.
Why would you ask that question?
Why
I'd
you
like to know
stand
why
here?
And you
Why?
answer him because he's white.
A couple things about alchemists that you wrote in the book that I found interesting was on page 50 you wrote, just as white racists in the past decided who was white and who was black, the alchemists do the same. They are the ones perpetuating the infamous one-drop rule. And then on page 15 you write, the alchemists have worked their magic well. They have transformed the golden promise of the civil rights era into the grim urban reality of today, and they promise more destruction still. If we are to stop them, we cannot equivocate. We cannot retreat. We must be heard.
Yeah. And a good example of the alchemist is Barack Obama. Barack Obama has created an environment that says that white people hate black folks, and that white police officers in particularly hate black people, and that they are killing blacks based on color. He's leaving out the fact that they are killing these blacks who are being killed because these people are thugs, and some of them are not following the instruction of the police officers when they're stopped. They're giving lip service.
Put your hands on me. I promise you. You will have to murder me. You will have to murder me. So go ahead and get ready to do that.
They're causing the police officers to have to take action, because when you're stopped by a cop, they don't know if you're gonna pull out a gun or what you're gonna do next, right? So when you don't obey the cops, then you put your own life at risk. And instead of Barack Obama telling blacks that they need to follow the instructions of the officer, they say it was due to racism. It's because you're black. And the justice system is not fair to black people.
When study after study shows that whites and people of color experience the criminal justice system differently. So that if you're black, you're more likely to be pulled over or searched or arrested. More likely to get longer sentences. More likely to get the death penalty for the same crime.
And so what he's doing is causing blacks to become causing them to become angry at white cops. And so when they go out and they act out and they get killed, then Barack Obama come back in and pretend like he's trying to save black people. And so what he does is he go after white officers, he go after the police departments around the country, and he changed the order of the police department. He take out the men and women who are going to do the right thing and put in his friends who are going to give him more power and wealth, work with him to turn America into a socialist society.
We need the Justice Department to step in and take over policing in this country. In the 20th century, they had to fight states' rights, and to get the right to vote, we got to fight states' rights in terms of closing down police cases. Police must be held accountable.
So he pretends that he's turning, silver into gold by acting like he's the friend of black people when he's really the enemy of them.
And what you said, it was funny because something you said about socialism was the reason is that the nuclear family is the single greatest deterrent to socialism. A functioning nuclear family does not need much in the way of government help. So, are you saying the alchemist, one of the alchemist's main goals is to break up the family?
They can't do it unless they break up the family. That's why they go after the man first, because once they get the man out of the picture, it's easy to deceive the woman and children. And so what they do, they attack the father, they attack the man of the home first, or the family. They say, oh, he's a rapist, he is violent, he hates women, he is just all kind of crazy things about the man. And when they can turn that wife or that mother against the husband or the father, then they can bring in the government, They can bring in programs. They can bring in whatever they need to control the woman and children in order to get them to do whatever they want them to do.
Interesting. Yeah, you also brought that up. You talk about a community advocate, Tony Herbert, and at one point it's about the fight in the McDonald's in Brooklyn, and what he was, after it happens, he was advocating for. He was saying there was lack of funding, lack of programming. And basically what you're saying is as much as I respect Herbert's good heart, he's saying the same thing that community activists said 50 years ago. But the problem is not local, and it is not a lack of funding. The problem is lack of fathers and mothers passing their anger onto their children. No amount of program will change that. So you seem to make like programs versus parenting,
Yeah,
right?
That's right. When I was growing up, I didn't know that the government took care of you. There was no such thing as programs. My parents and my grandparents taught us to work. From day one, we had to work. They taught us to be responsible. They taught us that to treat people the way we would like to be treated. So when we left home at 18, we were prepared to go out into the world and take care of ourselves. We did not have to rely on someone else. And what I've noticed is that these people tell black people that they can't make it because of quote-unquote racism. So we're going to give you a program. And they give them welfare, they give them food stamps, affirmative action.
What are the legitimate grievances in your mind that folks have about being here? Is it against the police? Is it against the poverty?
I think this is a culmination of a lot of different things. Decades old of failed policies, decades old of lack of development for these communities. I mean, it's a lot that pours into it, and these young boys are speaking tonight, unfortunately, in a very wrong way.
And what that does is take away your desire to take care of yourself. Because when you don't work, you don't develop inwardly. You don't grow as an independent person who can take care of him or herself. You become needy. You rely on the government. You rely on someone else to do it for you. If you notice, the average black man today, he is incapable of taking care of himself because he has not had his parents there to guide him and teach him while growing up how to be an independent person. So his nature has not developed. And so what they do is they either, if they can't get it from the government, they're going to steal it from someone. They're going to rob because they cannot take care of themselves. They don't know how to do it. They have been destroyed by someone else taking care of them.
Interesting.
I know men now who, we are working with men, I'm counseling with men who are 50 years old, 40 and 30, who are still living at home with mama because mama has spoiled them. She didn't make them work and develop that nature of taking care of themselves while growing up. And now they can't get away from mama. And so you have this dynamic going on where they hate mama because they know what has happened, what she's done to them, but they can't get away from her because they need her. So you have this love-hate relationship going on, and they're stuck at home with their mothers. I left home at 18. When I was growing up, my grandmother told me and my grandfather that we are going to prepare you to go out on your own. You have to leave at 18. And I would say to them, well, where am I going at 18? They would say, well, I don't know and I don't care. I'm preparing you. So when you turn 18, you will become an adult. You have to go. And at 18, I left home. I turned 18 in May of that year. I graduated from high school that same year. And I went up to Indiana from Alabama. I got a job at a steel mill for 2 weeks because I hated Indiana and I hate working at steel mills. I like California, right? And so I made a paycheck, and my very first check, I left and came to California, and I've been on my own ever since. But I was prepared for it. I was ready for it. I can't imagine being a man and living with my mother or anyone else at the age of 18. Men who live with their parents or their mother after 18 are weak and pathetic. They're worse than a woman.
Fair enough. Someone you talk about in the book a few times is Jesse Jackson, and you don't seem to be the biggest fan of Jesse Jackson. But there was definitely one interesting story that maybe I figure you could just touch upon. It was in 2001, and maybe you can explain a little bit. He was introducing the Rainbow Push members.
Yeah.
And you showed up.
Right.
And you had something to say. Could you just,
what happened, for 5 years, my nonprofit organization, Bond, held a rally in front of Jesse Jackson Rainbow Push office, L.A., and we would do it every year on Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday because we wanted to show the contrast between Dr. King's dream and Jesse Jackson's nightmare. And Dr. King said that one day Black Americans would be judged by the contest of character, not color. But because of Jesse Jackson, Black Americans are judged by their color due to the lack of character. And Martin Luther King also said that one day we would become one nation under God. But because of Jackson, we are more divided today as a race than any other time in the history of America. Barack Obama has added to that. And so we will hold these rallies to expose Jesse Jackson. I wrote about him. I did interviews about Jackson. He called himself a man of God, yet he made a baby by another woman there in Chicago. And while being married, he also says that he's a preacher who's supposed to unite the people, but he's used racism, so-called racism, to divide in order to gain power and wealth. And so what happened was Toyota, Jesse Jackson threatened to sue Toyota, right? Because they ran an ad of a black man with gold teeth in his mouth, and Jackson called it racism. And Toyota caved in, and they're going to give him $700 million or something like that. And so they had this big meeting downtown LA with Toyota and Rainbow Push. So I got an invitation to go because of my nonprofit. And I almost did not go, but my PR guy said, hey, we should go and check it out. I went down there, and they sat me right in front of Jesse Jackson. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, yeah, there is a God. And and so Jackson got up and did his thing, and the representative from Toyota Motors got up and said what it was about. They were here to help. And so during the questions and answer period, I raised my hand, and I said to the representatives from Toyota, told them about my nonprofit, and I said to him, is there any way we can go directly to you, to Toyota, without having to go through Jesse Jackson? Or I said, because we don't agree with anything that he's about. And all hell broke loose. Jackson and others started yelling at me, screaming and calling me the N-word, and calling me Uncle Tom. And his son, Jonathan Jackson, came over and sat near me, and they were trying to intimidate me. The meeting finally ended, so I'm over at the coffee table, waiting for my guy to give some information to Toyota. And Jackson's son, Jonathan, came over, and he hit me. He was so angry, right? And so he and I were going at it, and Jackson came over and started cursing me out and saying all kind of nasty things. Greg Mathis came over, Judge Mathis came over. And these people surrounded me. They were about to take me out. And at one point, I thought that they were going to take me out. It was like I was at a KKK meeting, except the people had on black sheets rather than whites. But they finally got me out of there. My guy got me out, and so we ended up suing him. Well, we took him to court, and we won on the assault charges, on the civil rights charges, but we lost on the assault charge, one kind of way. But it was fun because Jesse Jackson is such a wicked man, and he needed to be dealt with. But they hate me for that. And so they, the blacks, some of the blacks, or most of the blacks say that, I'm an Uncle Tom, I'm a sellout. And the reason they do that, because I don't have that anger in my heart for my fellow man. I realize that there's good and bad, and I know how to deal with that. I'm not an African American, I don't have an afro. I have an Amerifro. There are no African drums beating in my chest. The American guitar playing in my heart. I believe there's good and bad in all races of people, so I deal with people accordingly. And because I don't identify with my color, but character, they don't know what to do with me about that. They think I'm a sellout because I'm not into being black. I'm into doing what's right.
Excellent. And one more thing about Jesse Jackson I thought was interesting was, you speak about Du Bois and you speak about Booker T, and almost like being two different
That's right.
ideologies.
Yes.
And if Obama had any any intentions of going down the path of Booker T. Washington. It seems that it was stopped by Jesse Jackson. It seems like that. Can you explain that a little bit?
Right. Booker T. Washington, as I write about, he was born enslaved, slavery. And he was a real slave, the real deal. But yeah, in his heart, he knew that there was good and bad in other people. So he taught Black Americans not to hate. And he didn't grow up with that hatred. Matter of fact, his brothers were sold into, and taken away from the family. His father and mother were separated. But yet he didn't hate. And he went on and he founded Tuskegee Institute, which was in the area that I grew up at. And he taught Black people how to be independent. He educated them. He taught them how to be builders and to treat people accordingly. W.D. Du Bois was an enemy of Black people. He never grew up in slavery. He grew up north. He was a wealthy man. His family was wealthy. He was well educated. But he thought that he used what he called the talented tenth. That 10 Black people, or these educated Black people, should think for other Black people, tell them what to do and how to do it and when to do it. And they hated Booker T. Washington. They called him an Uncle Tom, a sellout, because he didn't hate white people. W.D. Du Bois eventually ended up leaving this country and denouncing his citizenship. He moved to Africa somewhere. He became an all-out socialist communist, and he died over in Africa somewhere, which was good for America. I'm glad he died over there and not here. And so Jesse Jackson and others, the so-called civil rights leaders, they have the same mentality that Blacks are not smart enough, they're not tough enough to think and do for themselves. They want to be the overseers of Black Americans. They're carrying it on, whereas Barack Obama could have had that same impact that Booker T. Washington had, but he decided to go the way that Jesse Jackson and the others have gone, so that he could use Blacks too for his own personal gain. The thing that I write about in the book is that the one thing that Jesse Jackson, Barack Obama, Louis Farrakhan, and all of those guys have in common is that they were raised without no fathers in the home. For example, Barack Obama had a white mother, Black father from Africa, but they were not married, and his mother hated her own color. She hated white people. And so while growing up, she taught Barack Obama that America is a racist society. White people hated Black people. And then his grandmother, white grandmother, had a negative encounter with a Black man. She overreacted to that situation. And whenever she spoke about Black people, she said it in a way that made Barack Obama believe that she was a racist and that white people were racist. His father came to visit once from Kenya while they lived in Hawaii. Barack Obama was in the 8th grade. His father spoke to his class, and he too pushed racism. He said that America is a racist society, Africa is racist against Blacks. And so Barack Obama grew up being taught that white folks were evil.
Barack knows what it means to be a Black man living in a country and a culture that is controlled by rich white people.
And then Barack Obama was not raised by his father, so he too has that emptiness. He doesn't have any love in his heart. Even after becoming the president of the United States, he still feels unloved and angry and out of control, because whenever you don't have your father, it leaves a void in your life. That's why we encourage men and women to return to their fathers, so that that void can be fulfilled by reconnecting with their fathers. And that's why Barack Obama can identify with Black Lives Matter, with Louis Farrakhan, Jeremiah Wright Jr., Al Sharpton. They all have the same thing in common, and that is no fathers in their lives, and they are empty within.
And that's also said about a lot of the people in this book, whether it's the victims of police shootings,
right?
The chapter you do on the Black serial killers. They all have they always comes back to a screwed up family life, and usually the father.
The father's not there, and they're angry at their mothers. Most men hate their mothers, and they hate their mothers because of the way that their mothers treated them while growing up. Either the mother was impatient with them or too mothery, catering to the kids, spoiling them, and they hate their mothers, and so they end up going out because you become like what you hate. and you also become attracted to what you hate. So you might not take your aggression out on your mother, but you go and find another woman who's just like mama. Even if you say to yourself, I'm not going to ever marry my mother, I want someone totally different. But because you become like what you hate, you're naturally unnaturally attracted to that same spirit. And it's never going to change until you're able to forgive your mothers for what they've done. And then God take her identity away from you and give you your father's identity. And that's when you can find peace within yourself. And so Barack Obama and others have that same spirit, and they are passing that on. As a matter of fact, Louis Farrakhan, I write about him, his mother told him that she wanted to abort him with a clothes hanger. That's how much she hated him. Can you imagine your mother telling you that? And so they all have that anger, but it's toward their mothers and fathers instead of white people, but they won't deal with that.